Switch that one through. There we go.
Yeah, so I see the dashboard. The chat is there. We're all here.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts up muted. Oh my God. That was a. Yeah, so hello, guys. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Ready.
All right, I'll kick off the intro.
We're ready.
Man. Hello. Welcome to the Underground QA Podcast, a podcast about quality assurance in the video game industry. My name is Chris Rando, and I'm a QA lead at Epic Games, and my pronouns are he, him. I have three fellow QA professionals with me today, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Myron. I'm the director of quality at Rango.io. My pronouns are he, him.
Chelsea, I'm the QA manager for live services at Riot Games, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm having significantly less audio issues than I had in my intro last week.
Hey.
Ariel?
Hi, I'm Ariel. I'm the
Little delay.
I passed on my audio issues to Ariel.
and I'm
apparently.
Ariel Smith. I'm the QA manager of Extra Games, currently working on Torchlight 3.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody, and welcome all of you that were able to join the stream.
Did you not hear me?
There's a little bit of this little delay.
Hang on. 1 second.
We can hear you, though.
Streamdog is currently sleeping. I don't know when she's going to wake up, but I promise more sound effects this week.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the reassurance that there will be sound effects.
I don't know if anybody caught this in the last episode, but Myron has a cat. And when I was rewatching the episode, I was like, oh, secret cat that you had never told me about. And I literally messaged him and was like, tell me about your cat. I need to know this right now. Did this not happen?
No, it did. It did. I was like, Mr. Wiggles, he's 11 or 10. He walks and moseys, you know.
He does. He definitely had a saunter going on. He was like back in the back right hand, like underneath the Lysol wipes. There was this very cute cow-spotted cat. He's there. So I'm challenging you, our viewers in the stream, to locate the Mr. Wiggles. It's going to happen.
Where's Wiggles?
Where's Wiggles?
Yes, where's Mr. Wiggles? He's
Oh, man.
Okay, so while we're waiting, let's talk about what we're playing. Mm-hmm. What are y'all playing right now?
Oh, goodness. Right now, I've been playing a large multiplayer version of Stellaris, where I'm playing with 4 other people, and then, of course, by large, I mean, like, only 4 other humans, and there's, like, 14 AI hanging out in there, and that is the biggest, funniest mess I have played in a long time, because there's so much happening in that game, and I'm barely understanding what's going on most of the time. So good. So much intrigue, and we're all on Discord just kind of talking to each other, basically just ranting about whatever dumb stuff we're doing with our individual empires and just laughing at each other the whole time. It's been a blast. I've spent way too much time. It'll be a little too late on a work night this week playing that. That's been my jam. How about you?
I've been addicted to Animal Crossing. Hi, my name is Myron. And
hi, Myron.
It works if you work it. The turnip market today is not super good. I'm not going to spend money I can't lose this week. I'm gambling in Animal Crossing because I want to buy the basement to my house and start a family one day. So
It's good to have goals.
in
That's
Animal
important.
Crossing, yeah. I mean, it feels like I'm at like Animal Crossing, AA, Animal Anonymous, um, but it feels that way some days. Uh, Being on furlough temporarily uh,
Mhm.
gives one a lot of time to really dig into their Animal Crossing addictions and idle hands and all. I've been
just
walking around
just
my
embrace
small
it.
apartment a lot in circles. So maybe by next week I'll have some balance. Uh,
Mhm.
There we go. I'm back. Can you hear me?
yeah,
We
Yes,
can
we
hear
can.
you.
All right.
Now we can get back to the subject at hand. Let's talk about it.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, today's topic will be we're going to talk about career paths in quality assurance. Whether you're a gameplay analyst, expert, or a programmer, there is a long term path for you in quality. So today we'll be talking about 5 different career paths in QA that we have discussed. There's the architect, coach, manager, producer, and technical QA career paths. The first thing I do want to bring up, though, which is probably is a good lead into this conversation of different career paths in QA, we've all heard that that feeling of that saying. We've all bumped into this before, where QA is the stepping stone into your real career in the industry. And I'm curious. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Does
Like,
anyone here have any strong opinions about that? Maybe.
maybe a touch.
yeah.
But I would love to hear your experience with this, feeling this phrase, this idea.
I'll dive in.
Yeah,
So
please.
I've had a whole bunch of run-ins with this phrase, where I've had various people in companies above me telling me pretty explicitly that like my path forward was into production.
Mm,
Um, Like I've literally had them like sit me down and give me the talk about how like I was gonna make a great producer and I should really like get out of QA as soon as possible and into production,
mm,
um, because that's what like you were supposed to do. And I mean, in their defense, part of the reason why they said that was because like that is what had happened to every QA lead at that company prior to me. So I understood why they thought that. Um, but at the same time, like I felt really weird about it because I liked being in QA and I did not want to be a full-time producer. I was okay with doing a little part-time production that I was doing at the time, but because they had me as a producer on one project and a QA lead on a different project, and I was fine with
mm,
like that weird hybrid. But I really liked QA. I liked testing. I liked mentoring people who were just getting into the industry, and I didn't want to move away from that. But like I felt actively pushed out of QA. Like you need to grow up and get on to something better. And I drove
You
me
need to
crazy.
grow up. That
Yeah.
is, oh,
I like
that's
how
a
you
good one.
described that. Like you said that you had the talk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
They gave you the talk. Oh,
Yeah. No, it was so
whew, right here and right
um
here. I feel that, man. Feel that area.
yeah. And so what wound up happening is I gave in and I was like, all
Hmm.
right, I guess I will be a producer. I will do the
Mm.
producer thing for a while because clearly that is what I'm supposed to do and that's what you're telling me to do. And you know what? I hated it. I hated being a producer.
Oh,
I did
goodness.
not get anything out of it whatsoever. I missed my job. I missed my department. I wanted to go back to
Hmm.
testing. And so the first opportunity I got to take another job doing QA again, I took it because I didn't want to be a producer.
Yeah,
Totally.
I think not coming from games originally, I was pretty offended when I heard this because I
Mm,
think that this is a really game industry specific thing. Um, so coming from enterprise software and coming into games, um, it was pretty offensive to me because I had chosen this as my path. I'd been a business analyst, I'd been a platform owner, I had been an engineer. Like, there are things that I had done in my career. And I will say, interestingly, the entry path that I had was customer support. So that was the stepping stone for me into a real job. And so
Yeah.
I'll say, like, interestingly, that that is a career path as well. You'll also hear people say that about customer support. That is how I got in to my QA career, was through customer support. So it's interesting to see the pathways in different lights. So it was offensive. It doesn't offend me anymore if it comes from someone who's trying to get into the industry. I will say it's a little off-putting when I hear people say, like, hey, do you have a job in QA? I'm looking to get into games. I would advise people probably not to go that route unless you're going to say this phrase behind it. What I really want to learn is how game teams operate, how to bring excellent quality, and how to be a better advocate for quality in my future career. I don't know what that is. That is the phrase that I'm willing to accept with that, because I may not know I want to be an engineer. I may not know I want to be a producer, but I know that I'm concerned about quality. And so what I'll say is, like, if you're a person looking to get into games and you're picking QA as your avenue, be specific that the reason why you want to do that is because you're concerned about quality. Otherwise, go ahead and try and be an engineer. Go ahead and try and be a game designer. Look for the internships. Those are the spaces to get involved, not QA because it's a stepping stone. Because I don't think that that's the actual truth anymore.
Yeah, it definitely used to be, right? Like, I think
Absolutely.
it absolutely used to be the case that if you wanted to get into games, the best place to start was in QA, because, like, game companies were habitually promoting people out of QA and into other departments.
Yep.
That is less and less true, though,
Yes.
because it's easier for them to find qualified candidates that aren't within their company. And so, but it's interesting to me because game schools, like schools that teach game design and game development, are still telling their graduates, apply for QA jobs, try to get a QA job, and use that as a stepping stone into the industry. They're actively telling them that, even though, like, if you want to be a designer, what you really should be doing is designing games. You should be making mods. You should be making indie games. You should be making board games. You should be looking for game design internships. There's a bunch of ways to get into game design that have nothing to do with QA. And honestly, they're probably faster.
Yes. To get into your actual career that you want. If you want to be an engineer, coming into QA is not the way to be a great engineer. Getting engineering experience is a great way to be an engineer.
Practicing your craft and being able to show that you practiced your craft is the way to do it.
Because I'm going to ask 40 hours of your time to be set on QA things, right?
Yeah.
You're not magically going to get 20 hours to go and code the game design principles you want to put into the game. It's just not going to happen. Like, your job when you come to work on my teams is to be concerned for quality. You may happen to do some producer-esque things, but that's a part of your job. And so I think actually that's what's attractive about QA, is that we all actively get to practice many different disciplines every day.
Yeah. One of the things that you said, Chelsea, there, about, like, your start in QA is, I actually started in support as well.
Did you?
Yeah. And I got into QA because I was addicted to The Sims a long time ago, a million years ago, it feels like. And if you play it for like 120 hours, they start telling you about the team that makes the game. And the producer was actually started off doing business software QA like I did. And so I was like, let me figure out how to get into QA. And so I happened to work at a proprietary software company, and they had an emerging quality practice, and they leveraged SMEs on the product to do QA, which is a way companies do it. But, like, it's really interesting that path. But one of the other things that I'll say is, working primarily in, like, business enterprise software, is that there is some of that where they're like, all right, especially if you're any good at what you do, they're like, okay, well, why are you still in QA? Like, you should be in product. You should be this. You should be that. Like, you're wasting your time. Like, your degree that you're going to do in music, you should be doing computer science so you can get into something like literally. And it's just really interesting that is what takes place. And so, like, after a while, they'll ask you, well, why are you in QA?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah. Exactly.
why couldn't you do something else? And I was like, well, I say this. The thing that's fascinating about QA to me is that at least in my experience, all the other domains are working primarily within a defined domain. So here's a problem that's specified. Here's what the solution needs to look like. Except content creation and creative professionals, that's different. Um, but those aren't the roles that people were recommending me for. They were recommending me for those other ones. And I was like, the thing I like about quality is that the domain is typically undefined. It's just like, here's what needs to work. You have to do all of the stuff that no one's written down or thought
Yeah.
about. It really piques my creativity, and I love it because of that.
Yeah.
I think that that's also part of the reason why I like working at smaller companies as opposed to bigger ones, is because at bigger ones you do wind up in more hyper specialized QA roles. Like, you will be, you'll, like, say you're working on Call of Duty, for example, you might be testing just multiplayer DLC for Call of Duty, and that's it, right? That is the entire focus of your career for like a year there or something like that. Whereas if I'm at a smaller company, I'm working on like every aspect of a game. So I'm looking at the audio, I'm looking at the design, I'm looking at crashes, I'm like anything that goes into the game. Like, I think that's like part of the reason why I like working on those smaller projects, is because I get to look at all of it.
Yeah. I think that's a pro tip. Like, if you ever wanted to know the difference between mega big company and smaller indie company or publishing route, that's it. And I think that's a super good nugget of truth. Thank you for giving that to us.
Yeah.
Because I get that question a lot.
What's the difference between a bigger and a larger company?
Yep.
Yeah. Bigger company, like, you literally can't get into the discussion. Smaller company, like, literally, like, if you can do it, people be like, you want to do this? All right, let's get it. Like, another hand that's going to help us out. And you have a much better chance of advocating for quality across the end-to-end process versus, okay, all right, cool, it's quality time. Everyone else go home. QA, you're locked in the room. Just get us the launch.
Yeah.
Everything is your fault.
Larger companies, you're way more likely to be told, hey, stay in your lane. But on the plus side, if you do have a very like specialized knowledge that you want to like utilize, a bigger company is probably going to be able to take advantage of that much better than a smaller company would. Like, if you are, say, a compliance tester and your specialization is certification testing, a smaller company is not going to be going through cert 24/7. So that specialty might not be useful to them most of the year, right?
Yep.
It's good to be thinking about, like, while you're working on a project that's going to be on console. But again, like, you're not going to be doing cert testing all year round if you have one project. So, yeah.
It's awesome. I love it. So now that we have kind of crushed the idea that QA is only a stepping stone, with the asterisk caveat of that lovely phrase that Chelsea brought up, why don't we start talking about a few of these distinct paths? So one that had been brought up before that actually became a little, like, this title at least became kind of new to me. A lot of these titles actually came new to me within the last year or so, is the QA architect. So let's start digging into, like, what are some of the typical skills and strengths that someone in this role would probably have.
So to go into this, a QA architect is someone who is hyper specialized. So we talked about this before in the previous stream, but the path for an architect is someone who doesn't want to manage, who doesn't want to be, and they're choosing it right? Like an architect is actively saying, I don't want to manage people. And therefore, what they're saying is, I want to be a specialized expert. And so the key to an architect is understanding what your specialty is that isn't, and then the one like star boop is
Mhm.
that you're also not an engineer. So I
Mm.
want to be really specific that architects are generally not engineering path.
Mhm.
They are specialized path. Um, so a couple of examples of an architect would be someone who specializes in mobile content releases,
Okay.
and they are an indispensable asset to getting a group ready for a mobile release.
Mhm.
They understand the pathway to getting through the certification process. They understand the conversations that need to happen very early on in the development process around performance. They're going to dive into understanding the device recommendations. They may even be an expert in getting mobile automation set up. And it may not be them actually setting the frameworks, but they're
Mhm.
walking the pathway to get the team successful on that. So, an architect is someone who the team relies on to bring specialized knowledge into what they're doing. They may be an expert in process. So, they may be the person who the group is looking to. If there are multiple QA groups, they may be saying, all right, Chelsea, you're the expert in getting teams established on process.
Mhm.
So, as an architect, I would walk into the room and say, are you doing test planning? Okay, let's start doing test plans. Here's how we do it. Are
Mhm.
you doing test cases? Okay, here's the formula for that. So, they are really the expert in bringing the team up to a specific level. They're hyper focused on training the team up. They're hyper focused on getting the team to be successful in their goals.
Mm.
And so it may be an embedded model, it may not. This doesn't have to apply to that. It may be um, even a situation where you are working as in a publishing stream or not. So an architect is really someone who's there for the team to bring them up to a specific level that isn't there for management.
That is an excellent explanation. That kind of helps me out a bit because I had heard, at least when I had first been introduced to the QA architect career path, it sounded a lot more of a technical career path. But being able to have that clarity, being like there is technical proficiency, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like these people are
Yes.
borderline engineers.
Yeah.
Like that's a really good distinction that is nice to hear.
Yeah, so we have one architect at Riot
Mhm.
to bring up someone specific, and he really is quite technical, but he's
Mm.
not like his job is not to sit down and write code. Like he
Right.
may actually write some code, and that's an awesome thing that he can do. But really, what he's trying to do is advocate for his teams to get into specific systems.
Mm.
And so I think that makes it distinct, right? His career is not to sit down and program.
Mhm.
His career is to bring teams up to that process.
Right. I love that. I also enjoy the it really like removing people from that management line because
Yes.
not everyone is suited or wants to do that.
Yeah. It takes the pressure off, right? Because, I
Exactly.
mean, if you don't want to manage people or you're not in a
Mhm.
space where you can manage people, that's also
Mm.
a thing, right? Imagine that the only career progression, and this is quite common in the industry,
Mhm.
is that you can be a QA manager or you're going to be an analyst forever or a tester. Um, that doesn't do justice to years and years and years and years and years of careers. You have to give people the opportunity to grow. And
Mhm.
so rather than restricting them, open up the door and say, where do you want to specialize? Let's build a path around that. The architect path really allows you to do that.
Oh, that's excellent. That's very cool. So they're able to. So they're the way that they are able to affect the quality on a product is by bringing this like larger knowledge base to the group in order to organize them and push them forward. Right.
Yes. It also is nice for growing teams. So let's
Mm-hmm.
assume that you might be starting really early on a project. There may be no one for you to manage. And in certain circumstances, there are laws which don't allow you to be a title of manager if you don't actually have people to manage.
Mm.
The architect path allows for your company, your group, your team to have a senior individual who doesn't have the responsibility of managing. They're setting up the infrastructure, they're laying the tracks. And we want someone specialized to do that. Just because you're a great people manager doesn't honestly mean that you're going to be a great activator. To go into StrengthsFinder, like
Real talk.
I'm gonna tag Myron in.
Yeah.
Activator is key in starting a team, correct?
Yes. Absolutely. Especially a team that needs to get things done right away.
Mm.
The funny thing from a strengths finding perspective, like most of my top strengths are like strategic thinking. So like in that case, I wouldn't be, a person like me
Mm-hmm.
would be the right person to get a team like going like right away, especially when there's like a deadline.
Right.
And so it's about the individual as well. Like, I have people on my team who are introverts who don't like conflict. So like harmony is like number 1 or 2 on their strengths. If you're familiar with Gallup Strength Finder from Clifton, and so they would never want a lead role or even a coach role. They just want to be very good and passionate about the products that are being built, about the experiences that are getting the customers. And that looks like a category that I'm actually going to champion for people like that person. It's been over a year, and we've been thinking, what do we do with this person who's amazing? That we've built up QA so everyone doesn't want to go out of it as a stepping stone.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, a year, 2, 3 years later, if we don't have anything for this person, we're gonna lose this amazing person.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna start trying to push them out actually because they deserve progress in their career as well.
Yeah.
No, that's legit. Like that fear of losing these good people because you're not sure what to do with them, but they have these fantastic strengths that really the team benefits from. Like this type of path can really be the way to keep those people and keep that team strong and keep those people engaged too, without having to make them feel like, oh, you have to go this way in order to really succeed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you have any input, Ariel?
I agree with everything that you're saying here. I definitely think that the skills that are needed to be a good manager are not the same skills that are needed to be good in QA in general. So when I see people like getting moved up to QA management and being a QA lead just because they're good at QA, like I worry about those people. Because I know when I first got to be a QA lead, I had no management experience. I had no management training. I had no idea what I was doing. I made a lot of really bad mistakes. But I got there eventually. But like what had happened is they had looked at my skills and they were like, all right, well, Ariel is a good test analyst. We should make her a QA lead. But what about being a good test analyst leads to being good in QA management? There's no direct correlation there aside from you're very knowledgeable about QA in general.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that it's good to have the opportunity for people who are good in QA to go up to management, but there also needs to be a smooth transition there of teaching people how to manage because they're not learning how to manage just by being test analysts.
Absolutely.
Whereas, say, an architect might not need that same level of like training, right? Because a lot of what they're going to continue to do is very similar to what they've been doing before. It's kind of like going from a test analyst to an architect sounds to me like going from a QA lead to a QA manager, right? Like it's very similar in sort of the types of things that you're doing, and the type of role that you're in. It's just more and at a different level.
Yeah. Yeah, Neil brings up a good point in the chat. So they state one thing we do is rather than having a standard experienced senior lead as the only progression, putting a principal title in which comes after senior, but is someone who is very good at the role but not always leading.
Mm.
That's it. This is
Yeah.
it exactly. So there's a branching point in your career path, right? At Riot, it's analyst, senior analyst, lead, and then you make the branch, right? So then you're
Fascinating.
deciding. Because at the test lead level, you
Mhm.
are learning how to manage but not managing. You're learning
Yeah.
how to be a specialist but not being a specialist. So, this is localized to Riot, but I think what Neil says is it, right? There's going to be a point at your company in which your career path branches, and it's
Mhm,
generally
mhm.
the manage, not manage. You need to
Yeah.
make sure
The world
that
of
that
skills.
not manage bubble, whether it's called principal, whether it's called architect,
Mhm.
a specialist role exists for you once you've reached a certain level. So,
Right.
I wouldn't advocate that an analyst is an architect. That's not it. We're going to make a specific amount of career jumps. You're going to have a specific amount of progression, and then you have the option. And so again, this talk here is about us talking about options for growth in QA.
Definitely. So like this actually was really good considering where this conversation went. We can start migrating over to like why don't now that we've talked about the non-manager kind of side of things, let's talk about what it's like going down that QA manager path, that more familiar path that people know about, where it's like, oh, when you get further up in your chain or in what discipline you're in, you start leading and then you just manage people because that's just what you do because you're real good at your discipline. So but there are people who have those management skills and those people skills and are great in that aspect or have that training previously. So why don't we talk about like some of the typical skills and strengths that people would have in that kind of a role? Like I'm pretty sure all of us have done that role at some point or are currently doing it.
I mean, I would also want to break it down between leading and
Mhm.
or doing the sort of like running a QA running QA on a project versus being a QA person manager. And
Yep.
they're different in the sense that like if you're a lead, you are responsible for things like talking to production and writing reports and
Mm.
making sure that the right bugs are getting focused on and fixed and all sorts of
Mhm.
things like that. And then there's this other component on the other side of that, which is actually managing the people that are working on your team or your department or your project or whatever. And sometimes those are the same role, and sometimes they're not.
Mhm.
So it kind of depends on what company or project you're on. At least for me, when I first started at Ektra, I was ostensibly the lead, but I and the manager, but I didn't have anyone to manage, so it didn't really like none of my management skills were really being put to use there. But
Mm.
I was doing things like writing reports, like talking and thinking and talking about strategy, like doing a lot of test planning and overall project planning and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, and then the management stuff came later when I actually had people to
Yeah.
manage.
So initially you were definitely leading the quality of like being the leader and champion for the quality on the product, but you weren't necessarily like leading a group of people yet.
Right, because there weren't any like QA
Yeah.
people to work like to lead yet. It was basically
Because you were the person.
yeah, I was the person. And we also had some help from our publisher. But yeah, like there was when there's
Hmm.
no people to manage, um, it's a slightly different role. And I think that role is also again closer to what a test analyst does than say the management side of things, which really I feel very strongly is an entirely different skill set because like there's a lot of QA management skills that you can get doing any kind of people management, whether it's in software, video games,
Mm.
retail, even. Like, there's definitely a certain level of like management skill base that is kind of universal.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Military also, but you have to subtract
Military, yeah, there you
the giving orders thing. That doesn't really work typically.
go.
So,
You gotta kind of soften it a little bit, round out those edges.
a friend speaking for a friend. Uh,
But I mean, so one of the things that's nice is, again, like on the smaller projects and teams and companies where maybe you don't have a team to manage. If you're not a manager, but you do like leading and kind of running the show, so to speak, and interacting directly with production and doing that kind of like lead type stuff, there is room to do that even if you're not interested in management. And I'd say that generally speaking, you're more likely to find that at smaller companies and on smaller projects.
Definitely. I totally agree. There's a little more opportunity to kind of just take, just like what was mentioned earlier. Just being like, well, do you want to do that? Yes, sure. Give me that. I can do it. And then you can add to your belt. I mean, like, yeah, I know how to do these things.
Yeah.
Awesome. So as far as like the people management kind of path, then, so what kind of skills do those involve?
So I'm
Oh
literally
yeah.
teaching a class on this right now.
Oh, perfect.
Really?
Teach us.
I'm doing the thing. And it's the best part of my job. And the reason why is because management skills are so much the soft skill aspect of things. How do you have a difficult conversation? How do you cultivate trust? How do you talk with people to let them know there's a problem, but reassure them that it's going to be okay? And so learning to be a great people manager is part of the key. And it doesn't mean managing people, the people under you. It means being able to manage the bubble around you. As a manager, you're going to be having conversations that are very uncomfortable, whether it's with people who are reporting directly to you and you're having to give them some bad news, or it's telling the person or people above you that there are going to be difficulties along the path, or maybe you're going to have to disappoint them and tell them that something didn't go the way that the team expected. And so if you want to know the biggest skill that you can have, and I think it's where QA generally tends to shine, it's communication. Like, we are so lucky that in our daily lives, communication is probably 51% of our job, if not more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's why you'll see that engineering managers have a little bit harder of a time stepping into that role, because careers where it's very IC focused, where you have a product and you're shipping that thing, it's harder to step into the communication role of a manager. So lowest barrier to entry usually, but highest expectation for me is on the soft skills. What are some other skills that we talk about? There's time management. You got to be a great time manager if
That's
you're
a
a
big
QA
one.
manager.
Yeah,
You
especially
are
considering the speed of what our industry tends to do on a
exactly.
regular basis. Like,
Yep.
if you can't manage your time, not only you, but your team is going to be underwater real fast.
Yep. So one way that I have kind of illustrated this in the past was through a scavenger hunt. And generally, if I give you a big list of tasks to do as an exercise, like, how are you going to pick what's most valuable? Learning the priorities of things, having the conversation. Those are the things that are ultimately really important. And so time management is super key. Trust is a part of the communication pathway. I think that there's a strategic thinking versus tactical thinking. Ariel brought that up. I think Myron has brought that up. Like, there is a different level of thinking when you're a QA manager, because you're making decisions for people. You need to be able to decide what's today's priority, what's 6 months from now priority, and concentrate on building people up along the way. So I think one thing people tend to make the mistake on is we get really focused on releasing this thing, releasing the game, releasing, doing this thing, when you need to step up, take a breath, and say, my architect needs support here. I need to get them training. My analysts need this training along the way. I need to build in 20% of the time for them to gain those skills along the way. And so you really have to be, if we don't do this for the health of the team now, we're going to be making mistakes. And so lastly, the other skill that I'll say is you need to be able to jump in and do. And so there are moments when I'm still writing test cases. There are moments when I've had to cover and one thing that I'm trying to do with my team right now is to learn the new automation tool that we just recently got. And so that means me sitting down and having them train me. I really believe that as a good QA manager, in my opinion, I need to be able to have my folks tell me about what I'm not doing well, and to be able to step in a crisis. Does that mean that I'm always going to do that? No, because part of the strategic thinking is sometimes I need to let my folks handle their own stuff. Sometimes I need to let people fail.
I honestly think that some of the best QA teams that I've been on have had people who were way more knowledgeable about specific things than I was. And the reason why I loved having that was because like I had people that I could learn from, but I also had resources on my team that like we're not only we're not only better at something than me, but I could trust them to do something so that I didn't have to take it on myself. Like
Yes.
when a QA lead or a QA manager is more competent than their entire team at everything, then they're probably. I mean, I highly doubt that that's often the case as they might think it is, but when you have that feeling of you can do anything that your team needs to do better than any of your team members, then there's going to be this feeling to like take all of that stuff on yourself because you want to make sure it's done right. And I would so much rather be able to have some people that I can say like, this is your domain, you're the expert, I'm going to trust you to run with this, you come back and tell me what I need to know about it.
Yeah. I once had the QA manager that like was they used to like be the pain bringer, like and they were like, I'm the best at everything and I wield this huge stick, and when I walk into the room everyone respects me. And I think that was a really bad lesson. It was a good lesson for me ultimately in my career, but like for several years in the beginning of my career, I felt like good leaders were people who scared people. And there was only
those are bullies.
Yeah, bullying by fear. My goodness, no, that is a bully. Thank you, Ariel.
but realistically, we have grown to accept that in a lot of business cultures, right? As proper QA, doom and gloom QA, gatekeeper QA, the QA manager that comes in and says no. And what I've really challenged myself to think about is, and Ariel, you alluded to it, if we hold on to the power, if we hold on to the knowledge, if we try to grasp this thing tightly, if we try to make it seem like there's some special formula, that the business can't exist without this black box of testing magic that I bring to the team, we are literally failing at doing our job of communicating, opening doors, expanding, saying yes. And I'm so passionate about that. And I would love to talk about it more if there's open discussion for the future on this. Maybe not today, but like the idea that you have to hold tightly onto something, that QA equals testing, your team does testing. Those things are setting ultimately your business up for failure. And so a good QA manager doesn't come in with a big stick and say no. A good QA manager opens the door and says, please come in. I'd love to show you the house that we're living in. It's got some cracks in the walls. We should fix those.
Right.
So go ahead, Myron.
Go ahead.
Like that's like this thought that I think about all the time is quality is the way to bring product to life, and how do you do that in that situation that you're talking about, Chelsea? You basically say, okay, all right, well, how can we get to yes? Or when they say, is it ready? You say, well, yes, we can. Here's the things that we can do, and you bring them into that team. You know, you bring the stakeholders, you bring everyone together, and make a decision, like a risk-based decision on what the release is, so that you're there with all of the teams when it's live too. You're not throwing it over the wall. You're joining the team. You're saying, here's how we can get it to work. Here's what our risk and our exposure is. If I might backtrack a little bit, like I think from a management perspective, it's really important for you to understand who you are as well, and what type of what's most satisfying to you.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
as a manager, it's really important for you to build a team that is successful. One of the things that I say when people ask me, "Well, what do you do, Myron?" I say, "Well, I build amazing teams that build either amazing things or amazing people, depending on what level it is. If they're building other people." And it's like, all right, well, how do you do that? Well, you bring an incredible vision, you inspire people, and you make it your responsibility, in my opinion, for everyone to be amazing. There's so many conversations I've had with my bosses. They're like, really, Myron? Like, everyone can't be a four. I'm like, well, we adjusted our goals every single 2 weeks. They hit all the things, and we launched 1,200% more than we were able to do the previous year with a platform that was impossible to launch. So I think these people are excellent. If I'm not shooting for excellence for everyone, then I'm not doing the right job. The other thing that I do from a strategic perspective is I find out what's necessary to build a team that obsoletes me in
Yes.
as little time as possible.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Because so this is a personal thing, but um, also sometimes people ask, well, Myron, what do you do? Well, I do whatever I want because I've built a team that's and they're literally a problem solving machine.
Perfect.
So every
I
day
do whatever I want.
I go on whatever I want. I have whatever conversation. I'll take on release management because it seems interesting. I'll take on DevOps, and I'll help change the conversation about quality and to build it into something new and refreshing in the delivery space. And so leadership can mean a lot of things, but there are those common things like identifying stakeholders, getting people together, getting the product to yes versus maybe
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of
I
opportunity for you too if you are in a part of the conversation from the beginning to the end versus just the end. By the way, pro tip.
Mm-hmm.
There's something I have really kind of disliked about the very concept of a green light meeting. I don't know if you've ever had anything like this, but
Oh, like a
it,
go no go kind of
yeah, a
thing.
go no go
Yeah.
meeting, and because inevitably, whenever it comes to me and they're like, "All right, Ariel, go or no go," and I always just want to say this is a trap because
It's
because
always no. It's
if
always no.
if I had a choice, I would have 2 more weeks of testing, but you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
give me that choice. So I either say no go and have to give you the reason of I'm vaguely worried, or I
Mm-hmm.
have to say yes, go ahead, and then eat it when something terrible happens. But I used to I used to go to green light meetings, and every single time I would say yellow. I would refuse to say red or green. I would always say yellow light. Go ahead. Here's the things you need to be aware of, and like that, I always found that that was a much more useful conversation to have.
Mm.
Instead of just saying yes or no, to say, well, here's the risk, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
here's the cost, here's the risk, here's an alternative, right? Here's what I think we should do. But the idea of just yes, no, green, red, go, no go, I hate it.
Those
This,
definitives of just like it's either one and it's ones and zeros. That's it. You can't
yes.
have like a yes but or a yes and being able to communicate that risk is really I totally agree with you is a way better way to
Yeah,
communicate that. I mean, like, yeah, you can ship it out if you want. You just need to know that all of these things are going to probably show up.
yeah.
Human
Only
brains do.
70% of the tests that I wanted to do, we actually did.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Exactly.
so there's that other 30% that we didn't get to, um, and we tried to be selective about which tests we didn't do and which test cases we didn't do,
Mm-hmm.
and we focused on the important things. But there's a good chance that these areas might have have problems in them that we don't know
Yeah,
about.
Yep.
definitely.
I find that's so much more helpful and informative, and puts the stakeholders in a much better place to be able to make a decision that is the correct one, because
Mm-hmm.
instead of like a go no go tells them either everything's fine or we need to do some crunch and overtime and delay, right? But there is a middle ground of like, all right, well, let's release, but let's keep an eye on things. Let's keep a closer eye on things than we would normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's watch what players do with this specific thing here, and let's be ready to react. Let's be ready to turn off that feature. Let's be ready to change change the store, whatever we have to do, right?
Right.
And being able to tell the production team prepare in these ways is just as valuable as saying we're not ready.
Yep.
I found personally.
Yeah.
It's communication, just like you said, Chelsea. It's like literally like the same dashboard
Cool.
could have someone say no, and like cross their arms, or well, here's the things that might break, or we've been talking for the last several weeks, and as you know, we could launch right now, or we could launch later, and here's the things that I think the team is most prepared to handle. It's
Mhm.
all about levels of communication, like in the
Yep.
end, like
Yep.
yeah.
Human brains doing human things, like
Mhm.
the things that they're best at. I actually wrote a newsletter. I try to write one every month to my like stakeholders,
Mhm.
and my article, which sounds really official. My article this month was actually on that quality isn't a yes or no; it's on a spectrum, and we do best when we do that. When we assess quality on a spectrum, we're
Mhm.
not gatekeepers. It's not a yes or no. It's not a binary. There are things that we can automate that are yes and no. We as humans should not be assessing things as a yes or no.
Mhm.
Like if someone even asks you like, hey, how was your dinner last night on a scale of 1 to 5, you're gonna be like, well, was it a 2 or a 3? Why are we even having this debate? It was good, but the onions were soggy, and that doesn't make sense. I don't eat onions, just as an FYI. But anyway, um,
I've had soggy onions.
I tried, y'all. I don't know. I don't do that thing very well. But the point is, like, Ariel, you make an amazing point that we
Mhm.
can't. It's not even like a spectrum is useful, but it's a color spectrum, right? It's some space in between, and we should be comfortable with that.
Mhm.
By the
Awesome.
way, the name of my I want to tell y'all because it's a pun is the Qual Street Journal.
Oh boy. Chelsea, I think you're gonna have to name all of our episodes going forward.
Yes, yes, Wall Street Journal.
Perfect. I love that.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I just had to share it.
Oh no, please never stop sharing QA puns. Oh goodness. So that was a wonderful conversation, hitting on all the soft skills and all the things we need to think about from the more like people management and leadership standpoint of uh, career path for QA. There was one a QA path that was brought up that Myron had talked about earlier. It was called the QA coach on either the previous episode or like last times we had spoken. And this is intrigued me because I'm curious. Myron, why don't you tell us more about this, the idea of this career path?
Yeah, and you know, I'll just say it sounds similar, but not exactly the same as the
Hmm.
architect. But in this case, it's someone who's explicitly going in to start a process where the stakeholders from a number of disciplines have turned and said, "Hey, look, like we really need to understand how to like improve either quality or we have a significant delivery problem.
Hmm.
We have a number of things now. Maybe we had very few before, but the bottom line is we have a lot of money on the line and we just can't meet our promises. How do we do? And so it's a combination. Someone who's very good in communication,
Hmm.
someone who will actually teach the process and facilitate sort of knowledge gathering sessions and actually like assess what the problems are and work with the teams.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of problem management, but this person also has a lot of skill in coaching, and that is meeting every person where they are, holding the space for them to learn and engage and get one-on-one supports and consulting, but
Hmm.
also to like learn those processes and treat every person that's actually involved as the experts and hold them, sort of hold them accountable for like a strategic plan that they design together. They bring
Hmm.
all the people together, especially when looking at like a value stream and there's let's say 5 or 6 different teams that aren't involved. So they are coaching uh, people on the end to end process
Right.
in that within that discipline. In this case, it's quality. This person can also be used either internally as a consultant for a number of teams, or in the case where vendors are involved. As you know, there's a lot of offshore teams and teams in this location or that location,
Hmm.
offices that need to be started up. In that case, you would send the coach to that team to help them with your internal processes. So if you have your own flow of work and there
Yeah.
are bodies that are ready, or a team that's ready to work with your team, you would send the coach there to actually teach them the processes and make sure that you have a well refined process before returning back to the mothership. And so that's those are the things that are involved more with the coach role,
Yeah.
and what I've seen and what I've done.
Yeah, so this is more of like a very versatile role then. So this is a role where you're advocating for the quality, but you're bouncing around to different teams, bringing your skill set in order to kind of help usher them through the process, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the coaching aspect of it is really important because this person is going to be coaching, like, using like coaching skill um, to support not only individuals on the team,
Hmm.
but stakeholders as well. Like you could be talking to the vice president about, their plans and what they want to do around quality and
Yeah.
help them formulate the strategy. Again, them as the expert, but using a well refined process of like knowledge sharing and like knowledge collection and discovery to get them to a plan and help them execute.
I love this because it's so uniquely specialized
Yeah.
um, to helping the mothership without I, yeah, I love it's so uniquely wonderful because it's almost like an expansion of the idea of an architect. Like
Mm.
it feels almost like just one step further. What we're going to do is become the process experts, and we're going to take that process and advocate it to our teams. I think interestingly, the QA coach um, career path uh, uniquely places you in the realm of scrum masters, in the realm of development managers, in the realm of release managers, and perhaps being the forward team that goes to use a Star Trek reference, like just beams down and says like, hey, let's assess life on this planet. Let's set up some good infrastructure before everybody else gets here. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure we're building the right things the right way. So I love this. I love this. And I'm
Mm.
so thankful to have the additional context on it. I had never really thought about it, but um,
Mm.
now I want I really want a QA coach in my org.
Yeah,
Yeah. This is really cool.
it's been really cool to conceptualize it. At Wrangle IO, we do consulting with companies all around the world, and one of the things that we found, since oftentimes organizations are trying to go agile or trying to leverage an agile transformation to
Hmm.
meet some other sort of secondary or tertiary, or in some cases quaternary goal. Um, but one of the things that happens is when they're, because it's a huge investment to do an agile transformation, there are
Yes.
really big dollars on the line, and they tend to do a very close reading of the frameworks. And all the frameworks leave out three roles: content creation or design or creative professionals, quality assurance, as well as product management. And uh, those are incredible opportunities to build a significant advantage in the market and accelerate your ability to change. Um, that's like the key thing that the coach is focusing on,
Mm.
accelerating your ability to change. Because when you can do that, oh, that didn't work, let's just change it.
Hmm.
You get to do things like what Facebook does and Amazon does and Google does. As recently they were like, hey, what's be cool? Let's just get into gaming. And because they know how to change so quickly, their initial products didn't even matter. Like, let's be honest. Well, I'll just be honest for myself, in my personal opinion.
Hmm.
Stadia sucks. It doesn't work. But you know what? they can change it 1,000 times a day, and they know eventually it's going to be good. They're just watching what Microsoft's doing and what PlayStation's doing, and they can
Hmm.
move those features up because they can change faster. That's the ability that a coach brings to an organization and to a team.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Being able to just kind of like Chelsea put it, like beam down. Here's what y'all need. Beam back. This is great. Oh, I love it. Very cool. Thank you, Myron. So this might be a good time to like kind of segue into the QA producer path, which Errol, you had mentioned at the top of our stream here. I would love to hear some more details about this. Like this seems like a very hybrid kind of role, and I'm
Yeah.
fascinated like how it felt for you being in this type of role.
Yeah, so it in some ways it's similar to a lot of the different roles that we've talked about today. It's similar to being a manager, it's similar to being a coach, and it's similar to being an architect. But the basic gist of it is that you I was so when I first became a QA producer, my sole responsibility was like come in and start the QA. We have no QA whatsoever. We've never done QA before
Start the
here.
QA.
Yeah, we've never done QA before. We have no idea what we're doing. Like, some of the people who have worked at Extra have been in
Hmm.
QA before, but it's been years since they've done that. They haven't like, kept up with the times or anything like that. So they really needed someone to just come in, own the QA process from start to finish. But there was no management involved. There were no other testers that I had to like oversee and manage. There was a plan to eventually bring some on,
Hmm.
but it was kind of vague and anomalous and hadn't really been figured out
Right.
what that was going to be. So really, what my responsibilities came down to is I was supposed to write up a test plan, figure out what the long-term QA plan for the company was going to be,
Hmm.
figure out what this department was going to be. Also, I needed to look at the project and at the team and assess like how has QA been going in the absence of any professional QA folks? Like, have we been writing bugs? Have we been doing any kind of testing? Do the developers understand what good QA process looks like? So that's kind of like where the coach components come in. Is like at
Ooh,
least
yeah.
in the beginning, I was kind of there like helping the development team understand like, okay, so this is a handoff process and this is why
Hmm.
it's important and why we really need people to like buy into this. But I was also doing a lot of the like process setup in terms of building Jira and building our workflows and kind of establishing how like the life process of a bug and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, so it is definitely a hybrid role between all of the different roles that we've talked about in terms of being a QA lead, like you're the person who's kind of running the QA the team and the process. You're also a coach in that you're coaching the developers on like what QA looks like and what good QA looks like,
Hmm.
and you're kind of trying to get them to buy into the processes that you're selling them. Um, and then it's also kind of an architect in that like you're the expert, you're the person who knows more about QA than anyone else, and you're trying to like bring that expertise to bear.
Hmm.
um so but again, none of that has anything to do with management. So that's part of the reason why manager type roles and titles didn't really make sense for what I was doing at the time.
Right.
um
Yeah, it sounds like you were wearing many hats simultaneously.
Yeah, and then on top of that, there was a little bit of overlap with actual producer,
Hmm.
because a lot of what I was doing is I was the one who was actually doing a lot of the bug triage, and I was like sending bugs like this bug is going
Right.
to this person and they're gonna fix it, and these are the things that we want to get fixed for this release. And I was also doing a bit of like release management. Like I've kind of been our live producer for a while.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there definitely is an amount of overlap between a QA producer and a producer that you wouldn't see with a QA lead necessarily,
Hmm.
because you are taking on sort of broader team roles, like doing stuff with a broader development team as opposed to just QA.
Yeah.
So
But I think like I would be hesitant to say that this is what all QA producers look like, because even QA leads and QA managers don't have the same job. If you go to like a bunch of different companies, like if you write down the job description of me and Chelsea, for example, we're both QA managers, but it's going to look very different because we work at
Yes.
very different companies and our
Yeah.
projects have very different needs. But like, so I think that if I had to say one
Very good point.
takeaway from the kind of spotlights we've done on architect, coach, and producer, it's that sometimes you kind of need to like figure out what the role is and what it needs to be, and that can be a dialogue between the development team, the stakeholders, and QA. And you can kind of figure out like, all right, well, in our case, what we really also needed was a live producer. So either the lead of production is going to take that on, or the QA producer is going to take that on. And because there was more overlap with what I was doing and with live production, it just made sense that I would be the person who'd be taking on a good chunk of that stuff. And so like I think that negotiation of what exactly is this role is super important, and I would like to see it happen more often. I think with older companies, not necessarily big ones, but older ones tend to get very kind of stuck in their ways in terms of what different titles mean and what they are. And I think it's better when they're a little bit more negotiable, I'll say, and give people some freedom to kind of expand outside of the constraints that you want to at least originally put them in, and because you might find that they're able to meet needs that you didn't even know you had. Which I think was the case when it came to live producer, because we didn't have live needs when we first went live into alpha. And then at that point we were like, all right, no, actually we kind of need someone who just like owns this process. And so Ariel, that's one of your hats now.
It makes total sense. As the need of the product and the need of the company like evolve, you need to evolve. You need to also change and evolve with what the role entails. So that totally makes sense.
So one thing that, sorry, Ariel, go for it, Ariel.
No, I was just gonna say that I think that producer is a bit more QA producer is a bit more non-specific than QA coach or QA architect. I feel like those roles are intentionally more well-defined, whereas QA producer is maybe very intentionally not well-defined because you want to be able to throw all these extra hats onto the role. But yeah.
Yeah, the thing I was going to add, Ariel, is that, and this is something I'll just tease. We probably don't have time to talk about here, but there's a different role that we haven't discussed, and it's different from all the roles in my opinion we've discussed, and it's quality owner. What you described, Ariel, sounds a lot more like the experiences quality owners have, and that is, you're responsible for the product. What should we do? And like every day, you have to figure it out. And if it breaks in production, you have to explain. You know what I mean? Or have built a dope team to support you, so the team is there explaining. But like, there's like that quality owner role, and in every company, it's a different level. But like, it brings in those other things that you're doing as a producer, Ariel. And it's worth noting that there is such a thing as a quality.
Yeah, exactly.
In addition to all of these roles, and sometimes you may be both.
And that was pretty explicitly like in the job description when they brought me on, is we need someone to own QA. Right? So you're not wrong.
They kind of told you without telling you.
They did. But there are QA producers at other companies, like
Yes.
Zynga, for example, has
Mhm.
QA producers, and they don't do all the things, all the same things that I was doing. Their QA producers are essentially more of a hybrid role between a product producer and a QA lead. From my understanding, I mean, I don't actually work at Zynga. I never have. This is just kind of some of the conversations I've had with someone who
Sure.
used to
Yep.
work there. But from the sound of it, it's basically like they're both in charge of QA on a specific project and also in charge of like talking to all of the various different like QA teams that are working on the project, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
compliance or the external QA team or whatever. But they're also doing some amount of the sort of day-to-day line producer type roles. And that's not the same as like owning QA as a whole at a company, because it's a much bigger company. That kind of role is somewhere else in the hierarchy. But there definitely is a QA producer role that is not QA owner. It's just I think that Myron was correct to pick up that I was an exception in this particular case. But also I kind of stumbled into the title QA producer. They I won't go into too many details about why, but suffice to say that the title QA lead didn't quite fit, and they didn't want to go QA manager because I wasn't managing people. So they said, well, how about QA producer? We'll just make something up. I love it when companies make titles up. It's honestly my favorite thing to see.
So you take out the sword, we dub the QA producer.
What is this job exactly? All right, well, call her that.
That's good enough. Close enough.
Yeah.
Hey, she's pretty good. Does she want to go to development? No. All right. Well, let's just make her QA producer.
Yeah.
Let's make it official. Like,
I just love that after years of like being super resistant to being a producer, they finally tricked me into being one.
Surprise producer.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
They got me good.
I think one interesting thing I've seen with QA producers before is that they own the data of QA. So something interesting that I've seen is they own the actual QA data that comes out, creating reports, creating dashboards, figuring out how to get the communication of the data outside of the hands of a QA manager who may be incredibly stressed, overstretched. So I think something to think about too is looking at QA producer, quality producer as ownership of the data of quality, ownership of the communication of the data of quality, and influencing the production of that information. And I will say what that means is it is not just the data of testing. So again, I want to be really specific that what we should be doing with QA is stretching the bounds of what quality means. Quality is not a testing thing. Quality is all encompassing a large portion of it. It's looking into code quality. It's looking into how many issues are we passing back. I mean, these are things that are hybridized between producer roles and QA, right? What we would hope that producers are doing is looking at the fix rate, for instance, and how many issues are being passed back. A QA producer may step in and have that data on hand, maybe speaking with the engineering teams on how to improve their code quality, maybe speaking with the designers to improve their rate of change fixes or whatever the situation is. So QA producers can have pretty far-ranging effects. I've seen really, really good QA producers focus on the quality data and the quality team process, like Ariel's been talking about.
process.
Yeah.
Process.
And there's
Thank you.
There's
a
whole
this debate. It will be eternal.
There's a whole host of different kinds of data points that you can look at that have nothing to do with the number of defects found in test.
Yep.
Like you can compare things like crash rates and player submitted bug reports versus how many people are actively playing right now. There's mean time to fail, which I learned about the other week.
Hey.
There's also all sorts of analytics you can look at depending on your project and how you've set it up. But you can look at things like, how far are people making it into the game, right? Like what level are they not playing at? What quest is the typical or most common last quest that players have before they stop playing, things like that. And I think that this role that you're talking about, a QA producer who owns the data, could expand beyond just owning the data in Jira and start looking into things like analytics and things like that to kind of figure out what other conclusions can we draw from the data that's available to us. Bruce, this is what I get for looking at chat while I'm talking. It's QA producer is a role that I think it has sort of more common job description that is more along the lines of what Chelsea is talking about, and also more along the lines of being like a hybrid QA lead producer. And that's kind of what I think you would expect to see more often when you meet a QA producer throughout the industry.
So let's swing back to the more technical side of QA. So
I'm gonna mute myself for this.
So I'm curious. So I am not the most, like, I am technically proficient as far as like, I can use the tools that I need to use. I can talk the talk. But as far as like going under the hood and actually being like technical in the engineering kind of standpoint, that is not me. And so I'd love to hear some more about this more technical career path that those of us in QA can take if that's what we're feeling and doing, would be, despite, let's see, what's the right word to use? Not wanting to be like a full-on engineer.
Sure. So the technical QA path, and like optimally, not optimally, that's the wrong word. So the technical QA path, you'll hear it expressed as SDET, software development engineer and test. Sometimes you will hear it as QA engineer. Sometimes for those of us who are technical, we may be QA engineers, or for people who are not technical in terms of programming, they may be QA engineers. There's a whole level of things. So when I'm talking about this, I want to level set with you right now. I mean QA people who program. Engineering is a really distinctly not programming term. So engineering is different. There are many types of engineers. There are mechanical engineers. There are electrical engineers. There are test engineers. Test engineers don't need to be programming. So when we say technical, I'm equals programming. Okay. So let's start there.
Okay.
So I want to be a technical QA person. What is my career path? 1, learn a language. I get a ton of questions about this. Learn any language. I can give you some great advice, but in order to develop this career path, you need to be able to speak and write the language of your peers. If you are working on a web product or a web game, that means you need to learn JavaScript. If you're working in UE, that means you need to learn C++. If you're working in Unity, that means C#. You need to be able to debug code in Engine or in log. That's the first step. I actually think that debugging is a skill that every single QA person should have. You should be able to look at a log that comes out of a game, that comes from a player, and say, all right, I may not know what line of code is affected, but I can generally point the development team to the area or space to start. That may not be the end goal. So that's how you can start on this path.
Yeah, you can pick out those assets at least. I mean, like, oh, this has to do with this one thing. Oh, cool. I know who to start with.
Yep. There are some amazing tools that are out there that you can get started in that are AI oriented that can help you with this, with getting there. We use them on my teams. All right. So what's the next step? The next step is that you're able to code alongside of your engineers. What does that mean? They may lean on you to write unit tests. That is the escalation of the career path. They may lean on you to write in-engine tests. All of the new generation engines have built-in testing for them. If you are working with assets, that may be writing tools for tool pipelines. So that may be asset validation for intersecting vertices, for instance. That may be looking for holes in geometry that people could fall through. Those things are the technical ways that you can be involved in games. Okay, so we've taken step 2 or 3, whatever that is.
Yeah,
Okay, step
okay.
4. I'm writing the frameworks for testing for other QA people. So, as a baseline analyst on my teams, what I'm going to be pushing them towards is to be automating those binary yeses or nos. And my highest technical level QA engineers are going to be giving my lowest level QA engineers, because those are analysts for me, the frameworks to write tests. They're going to be saying, okay, here is how you can validate that the timer is working. Here, for boundary value testing, write the tests. Here's the framework. So we've gone from writing tests in a technical, a programmatic manner to writing the framework for others to write the testing. And so that is what your upper highest level QA engineers, your SDETs, are doing. They are making the frameworks for others to build testing off of. They are working strategically with engineers to make sure we're allowing that process to be built in. They're working to make tooling for that. Again, to write the tools for asset validation, to write the build tools that are needed to validate a build. BVTs, for instance, some folks may call them. If your automated BVTs exist, that would be the most technical, the most program-minded QA people.
Yeah, like I like to describe that as building tools and solutions.
Yes.
And oftentimes at that level, oftentimes those solutions are customer facing as well, or can be customer facing. And also depending on the type of organization, the SDETs can be an integral part of the actual level 3 support team. And by level 3 support, I mean uh, this is the team that handles issues and they fix, or they can fix issues, and they actually have a backlog and they're doing development or of minor features to support the live product versus the development teams that are doing innovation and building new products or new features that are unique to a particular platform.
Yep.
So these people are building tools, frameworks, as you said, Chelsea. They're building solutions. They're actually like, if there's no test tool to do a particular thing, and there's no DevOps or CI/CD pipeline tool to do something, then they're actually, as a part of their role, building those tools for the team.
Awesome.
So here's a question for you then. So what is I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it said out loud anyway. What is the advantage of having a specialized SDET as opposed to putting these kinds of tasks and expectations onto the broader engineering team as a whole?
Sure. So what this allows the team to do is to have someone who's focused on quality, just like a QA person who's focused on the code for testing quality, right? If you have someone who's in the mindset of quality from a programmatic perspective, they're another check on your engineers who are writing code. They're also going to allow the engineers to have the tools that they need. So this doesn't take all testing responsibility away from the engineers. engineers should still be writing unit tests. They should still be running BBTs, but the framework exists for them to write it at the same time. This can drive more of a test-driven development (TDD) approach, which means to be super quick about it. Imagine you have someone who writes the test before the code even exists, and then all the engineer has to do is write the code to that spec. Once it passes, then we know that the code has met the specifications. So that's also something that having an SDET in the team can do. So really what we're looking at is an increase in velocity because we've got an increase in knowing the quality bar very early. It's like if you write an amazing test plan before a feature even gets started. The positive of that is that the team understands what we're shooting for and therefore goes for that quicker probably than saying like, hey, is this supposed to be green or red? Off the bat, it's supposed to be red and we're going to do this thing. So bringing an SDET, bringing an engineer, a programmer onto your team that's concentrated on quality allows you to really focus on what's important, which is moving as quickly as possible with an idea of quality in mind and enabling the rest of the team to do that.
Yeah, and it's like I forgot I was gonna say. But the SDET, so like I consider that to be a role, and so to your, a question that I kind of heard you ask, Ariel, is well, why having a single person? I would consider it like a role. So, for example, if you have a team of 10 people and 5 of them are software developers, then they can rotate that role. Like it's just a matter of all right. So like today, I'm gonna be taking on this thing. I'm gonna pull this card from Jira, and I'm gonna be operating in that role. And to qualify me to do that work, I'm proficient in these skills.
Right.
So other everyone else may be writing in this particular engine, but I'm writing literally so that my stuff can go through Jenkins and get into Jira with Zephyr and all these other things. And you have to be proficient in order to do it. So I just want to bridge that. And so like one of the other things, and this is off topic, but like when asked for ratios of like how many testers to blah blah blah, it's best to think about it, especially if you have a cross-functional team, which I recommend. Uh, Capacity and like the role people are playing versus the number of people in this title at this particular time, and they're only going to do X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
or X, Y, and Z. I get to say Z now too. So yeah.
You're gonna start saying H soon. I know it.
Z, project, and cheers. It's great.
Do you get the extra U as well?
Yes. Color center is spelled CENTRE. It's awesome.
Amazing.
Cheers.
Whew, cheers to that.
Cheers.
All right. Well,
sorry.
no, go ahead, Chelsea. It's okay.
If your teams are worried about hiring in engineers devoted to testing, what I would do is really have a conversation about how much engineering time is being spent on quality right now, and how much you could gain from having even an associate level engineer come onto the team to help you with quality going forward. One SDET can help out many teams all at the same time. Imagine you're building in-engine frameworks for your testing. That affects all teams that are there. Imagine account creation being an automated process that someone has built. Imagine the ability for someone to build a tool which auto levels characters, which auto gives them assets, which those are the sorts of things that engineers, programmers devoted to creating content to help test. Those are the sorts of things that are very practical that engineers who are devoted to making the game don't often get time to do. It's an afterthought. imagine you can pitch the idea of, we're going to save 100 hours of testing simply because this tool exists for the next year and every year thereafter. So try to imagine the things that you're doing: account creation, giving of assets, automating of the prerequisite test data, getting players into the place where they're going to be. These are the sorts of things that we should be conquering with automation, with programmers behind these desks. And so it's not just running tests. This role is for someone who is developing helpful strategies long term that will help engineers, that will help our designers get into game, that will ultimately help our players, will help our player support get into a space where they can move forward. And so don't just take the approach of people in some IDE somewhere writing code. It is people writing tools to help our teams, our players, our long-term success be even more successful.
This is a slight tangent, but I wanted to talk about this really quick. So one of the things that you were just talking about is like auto leveling and giving you your character stuff so that you can jump right in, right? We actually created a tool that we gave to our beta testers that allows them to do exactly this. We have these what we call playtest NPCs. They're NPCs that you can go talk to in town, and they will automatically level you up. They will automatically spend all of your skill points and give you a respec in case you want to change it. And they'll give you a bunch of gear, and they'll put you at a specific point in quest progression somewhere down the line. And each one puts you in a different place and gives you a different kind of set of gear. So we made this originally to make our playtests easier to organize. But then when we got to a point where we realized, like, hey, our players are basically just helping us playtest the game now, because we're no longer in this. We moved from being a free-to-play game to a premium game. So our headspace in terms of alpha moved from we're practicing being live to this is a testing space where players are helping us test the game. So we were like, let's give them these playtest NPCs so that they can just get out there and test the game. And one of the interesting things that's come of it is it's made progression blockers that happen on our live environment less of an issue, because players can just skip past them if they ever run into them using these NPCs. So we've actually been able to move from doing 3-week updates to 1-week updates, in part because we don't have to worry about shipping progression stoppers as much, because we have these tools that we can let players skip ahead. Now that's I think that's a good analogy for some of the benefits that having those kinds of tools can give you just in your regular day-to-day testing and development.
Yeah. Right. Imagine not having to wall crawl. And this is something that no one likes to do, right? Like the typical grandma's boy approach to QA should not exist anymore. That doesn't mean that we don't have people doing those things. It means that we're targeting. Imagine that in grid, whatever, we have had consistent issues. Through automation, we can find it, we can heat map it, and we can send someone to validate it. Not send someone on some quest somewhere to figure something out, right? Like these are spaces where we shouldn't be afraid as QA professionals of automation, because what they're going to do is get you to stop wall crawling and get you to start using your human brain to think of what's fun in the game. And Ariel's team is enabling that. By giving people the ability to skip past issues, players are able to go and have more fun. They're able to go and enjoy the content that they want. These are the things that we should be doing, right? When we have people devoted to figuring out what's good, what's fun, you can enable that even more by having people in quality roles really concentrating on that. And so spend your resources for programming on enabling yourself to go do what's more fun, to spend your time enabling yourself to do your real job, not the one that you hate doing, not the repeatable crap. This is what QA engineering, what the technical QA path is all about. Because someone's going to dig that. People like writing code. People like doing this stuff. People love programming bots. For people who are the Sims kind of, players, like this is real life that.
You just reminded me how sad I am about the current state of our bots, because we had bots set up for Torchlight to test it, and they are still usable for very specific things, but it's mainly just like stress testing the servers, and that's about it. If we had someone in this kind of role who had been willing to taking that to the next level of like making our bots able to find like nav mesh issues, for example, or something along those lines, like that would have been so great, but unfortunately didn't pan out that way. But because we're a small team, we don't have the same luxuries that larger teams have, as sad as that makes me. But
that's reality, right?
Yeah.
You can't get caught on that stuff. But what you may think is like, for the next project that you work on, you may say like, hey, can we hire an SDET to bring in so that we can have this, right? Like, being a small team doesn't mean that the world that you live in right now is going to get instantly better. But what it means is, when you approach your next role, when you approach your next company, when you approach what the next interview is going to be like, you're going to say, hey, do you have someone who's devoted to QA tools? Can we devote someone 30% of the time? Even if we can't hire an engineer, like Myron, you and Ariel are having the conversation, if it becomes a role and not a title, cool. But you learn to negotiate for that. Or you learn that you can be that person, and you say, hey, part of the deal with me being a QA professional is that I'm going to come in, I'm going to walk in, and I'm going to bring you 30% engineering excellence. I'm going to come in and I'm going to program. Right? Like, these are the things that we can start to do to negotiate a better career path for ourselves, or negotiate a better future for our teams. If you're a QA manager, or if you're an architect, hey, I believe that this is a role that we need to bring in. Or if you're a QA coach, hey, you all should think about doing these things for the future, right? You should think about how to integrate these processes. Sorry.
I agree. Like, definitely when you're on a smaller team, it's useful to be able to take that moment and be like, well, maybe we can't dedicate an entire person to this, but can we dedicate a week out of the month of someone's time to do it? And maybe that person changes every month. But also, like, I never stopped. You never stop doing the cost benefit analysis of either creating or even like buying or licensing QA tools. And sometimes a tool that you're used to, like, I think a good example here is maybe TestRail. A lot of companies use TestRail for their test case management and stuff. And I've been at other companies where we looked at the number of licenses we would need and the amount it would cost us, and we were like, well, I guess it doesn't really make sense for us to buy this tool, even though like it would be useful. The cost benefit analysis just isn't there for us right now. And I'm constantly doing that with all kinds of different tools, right? And so at some companies, I might see a tool and be like, yes, I definitely want to have that here. But then I go somewhere else and I'm like, I don't actually want to use that tool here anymore. I want to do something else that makes more sense for this company.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to start reeling stuff in a little bit. This has been an amazing conversation, going through all these different roles. Thank you, all of you, for this discussion, from Myron, Ariel, and Chelsea. This has been absolutely fantastic. We'd also like to thank all of you that have joined us today. Thank you so much. We wouldn't be doing this podcast without you, or this stream without you. Like, you're very important. If you have any suggestions of future topics that you would like to hear us discuss, or if you have any other bugs of the cast or bugs of the day that you would like to share with us, please tweet at us, send them our way. We'll be sure to review everything and most likely bring it up on stream. If you are a QA professional and you would like to be on our cast, you would like to join these conversations, we would love to hear from you too. So in either case, please contact us at underground. Oh my goodness, I'm having the worst time right now. Our email is undergroundgameqaconf, CONF, at gmail.com, or you can reach out on Twitter at undergroundqa. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to collaborate some more, and we want to be able to stream for you and podcast for you. So to close it out, just wanted to check to see if anybody had any shout outs that they would like to to bring up. Chelsea. Nope.
Out goes. Oh, am I there? No?
Yes,
Yep,
you are.
you are.
You're back.
Am I here? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Today's shout out goes to you washing your hands. Wash your hands. I'm not going to give a specific shout out to a quality organization, but you are in charge of your own bodily quality and those you can influence around you. Please wash your hands.
Bodily
Please.
quality.
Please stay safe. And, be good humans. Right now, it's really hard. There are a lot of people around us that are having challenging times. There are a lot of folks that are out there. Do what you can. That doesn't mean give money. That does mean give your time, either through listening to people or creating beautiful art. Teams. A lot of us are when we're on video conference, but being a good human right now, being there for one another, it's going to be so key. It is hard. And if you are struggling, if you need someone to reach out to, and you may not even know me just but through here, please reach out. There is always someone here for you. It is a tough struggle. If you're looking for a job, tweet at us. If you're looking for a connection, hop on LinkedIn. That's my shout out today is to you, good human, and for improving my life every day by allowing me to do stuff like this, and for improving those around you by being a seeker of quality. Thank you.
Goodness, thank you, Chelsea. Ariel or Myron, any shout outs today?
Yeah. Oh, well, Ariel, you go.
Yeah, I have a shout out of a sort. It's a job opportunity actually. My friends over at Unknown Worlds are currently looking for a QA lead. If you've never heard of them, they're the folks who make Subnautica. They're an awesome company. We actually share an office with them, and I've had the awesome opportunity to hang out with and talk to Charlie Cleveland and the rest of the team there. They're currently looking for a QA lead. It's actually sounds like it's very much in a similar vein of my current role in terms of this would be the person who would own quality at this company. So if you want an opportunity to work with an amazing company and amazing people, I highly recommend you go to unknownworlds.com/jobs and check out the posting there.
Awesome. Bring it home, Myron.
Yeah, so I have a buddy who has a really cool he sells like really cool designs and t-shirts and things of that nature. In our last stream I was actually wearing one of the shirts, the Fail Faster shirt.
Oh yeah.
I really love that shirt because it embodies so much about what satisfies me about quality and delivery. And so yeah, if you have a few bucks, or if you want to go check out the website, I just put the link in the stream, geekygoodies.com/fail faster. That's where you can find the shirt faster. Check it out.
I am clicking that link right
Chris,
now.
what's your plug? You get to give a plug too. You're our host for today.
Goodness. Oh my goodness, I don't have anything to plug. I can't follow up any of you with anything good. No, just I mean, if I was going to shout out to anybody, it would be my team for the way that they've handled our work from home process over the last month now. They've just been absolutely solid. We've had a lot of bumps, but we've all managed to adapt and overcome, and we're tweaking our process in order to move forward and be able to make sure that the product that we put out is the highest quality we can manage with from what we can from the area of the game that we work on. So thanks to all of them.
Oh.
They're beautiful and I adore them.
On a semi-related note, quick little testing pro tip for the week for working from home. I've been doing this past week and it's been amazing. My team and I now have what we call our testing hour, which is from 2 to 3 every day. We just hang out on voice chat while we're testing. And sometimes we will help each other with stuff. Sometimes we'll play test together. But a lot of the times we're just kind of there hanging out, talking to each other while we're doing our normal thing. That has helped immensely with kind of bringing back some of the normalcy of hanging out at the office with people while you're working next to them in a pod. So if you miss
Exactly.
that, and if you feel like your team like needs a little bit more like direct, regular, daily connection, I highly recommend doing that. It's been super successful for us.
That's a really good pro tip. Yeah,
Love
my team's
that.
been doing that, and I love it. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, and with that,
Y'all are the best.
that's an
Do we have
amazing.
wait? Do we have a bug of the day?
Oh yeah, we had a couple bugs come in. A couple bugs were reported. One of them is brought in
I like
by.
that report.
A couple bugs have been reported this week.
This was it is at Cryptic Jackknife on Twitter. Brought up an old Donkey Kong 2, Donkey Kong Country 2, any percent run. So this is the has 9 wrong warps. Most utilize the invisible barrel glitch to manipulate existing warps or summon entirely new ones, and it's a true glitch magic. They also attached a video to the tweet that was put out earlier this week, which, by my goodness, has one of the absolute best gifs I've ever seen of a bug. I would love to know what game this is from and why this horse is swinging their arms this way.
Oh yeah, that was a great gift. I really love the just so like speedrunners tend to find a very specific type of bug, which is like the hardest imaginable to reproduce issue that like no QA person actually doing their job would ever find, right?
That is
Because like
real talk.
you have to have an amount of free time to waste on like looking for stuff like this
Yes.
that testers don't have, but speedrunners definitely do because of all the time that it eventually saves them. But I love some of the bugs that they come up with because they are truly absurd.
Some of them are spectacular. The other bug that was brought up by at Do Arquette, Darren Arquette, and he says, I had one on my PS2 version of God of War. Towards the end of the game, the player had to kill everyone in the challenges of Hades to open the door to continue. But in their specific copy, the door wouldn't open instead, and only after killing everyone, the wall above the door could be clipped through. So
In
something
their
got weird.
specific copy,
In their
So they-
specific copy. So yeah, this is amazing. So either that would be incredible if something burned that incorrectly on the disk, or it's like their specific save file just kept getting this one thing.
yeah, that's gotta either be something wrong with the disc itself or their copy had a different build applied to it or
Yeah,
something
another
like that.
build with this bug fix just not in.
Maybe. I don't know.
Fascinating.
Games
Cool.
as a service, y'all.
there was one of the very first titles I tested. It wasn't actually a game they were making, but one that they had already made, and it was for the purposes of going through training. You had to test this like Pac-Man 3D game for the PS2, and it had a bug in it where you could not like get one of the pieces of fruit you needed to get an achievement.
Mhm.
So it was actually impossible to get all of the achievements on that game for good. And it shipped that way.
Oh no.
Yeah. And guess what? That was
Whoa.
before you could update things after you shipped them.
Oh. Oh.
Ooh.
Oh, well. I would be
Amazing.
so mad if I was like trying to 100% that game and couldn't.
And just like literally impossible. Well, all right.
All right,
And
gang.
And with that, we'll close it out. Thanks again for joining us. Thanks everyone here for participating. And until next time, keep playing and keep testing. Please wash your hands.
Please wash your hands.
Thanks everyone. Enjoy your day.
There it is.
We did it.
Are we not
Good show,
broadcasting
everyone.
anymore?